When his body jerked, he turns around facing the cop and he put his hands in the air.
We lost a young man, Michael Brown, in heartbreaking and tragic circumstances.
It was 7 days ago when Michael Brown was gunned down by Darren Wilson.
If we're going to achieve justice, we must first have and maintain peace.
I'm Angela Ray. Racial tensions in Ferguson, Missouri are palpable. National Guard troops have been ordered into the St. Louis suburb more than a week after unarmed teenager Michael Brown was shot and killed by white police officer Darren Wilson. Private autopsy results show that Brown was shot 6 times, including twice in the head. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder says the Justice Department will conduct a 3rd autopsy. Throughout this special edition of DC Breakdown, Seeking Justice in Ferguson, we will look at all aspects of this evolving story with a distinguished panel of contributors. But first, the very latest from CNN.
After a night of chaos, Missouri's governor has tapped the National Guard to restore calm in Ferguson. Hundreds hit the streets voicing their anger over the death of Michael Brown more than a week ago. Police in riot gear fired tear gas into the crowd after they say violent protesters began attacking officers.
The situation first started to deteriorate with a shooting of a civilian. That was followed by shots being fired on officers, a number of Molotov cocktails being hurled, and then the looting.
Adding fuel to the anger, an autopsy arranged by Michael Brown's family shows the unarmed 18-year-old was shot 6 times. 2 of the shots were to the head.
We believe that given those kind of facts, this officer should have been arrested. Those things speak for themselves. Why would he be shot in the very top of his head?
Michael Brown's mother echoed that call for justice this morning.
What is justice to you?
Being fair, arresting this man and making him accountable for his actions.
She's talking about Darren Wilson, the man police say shot Michael Brown. According to Yahoo, these photos are from his father's Facebook page, which has since been taken down. Meanwhile, in St. Louis, more than 100 people gathered to show support for Wilson.
We're keeping the community of Ferguson in our prayers, and even Michael Brown's family in our prayers. We just asked that everybody do the same thing for Officer Wilson and his family.
In Ferguson, Missouri, I'm Polo Sandoval.
As you can see from that report, the situation in Ferguson, Missouri remains volatile and very unpredictable. Miami Herald World editor John Yearwood is watching those events closely. He joins us via Skype from Florida. Good to talk with you again, my friend. This is a situation that is heartbreaking and unfortunately is not going to be resolved anytime soon.
It doesn't look that way. We certainly hope that there is a fairly quick resolution, but this has continued on for quite some time now, and we're not sure exactly what the end game is. So a lot of us are holding on and hoping that we can see a resolution sooner rather than later on this.
Well, with the National Guard being called out, it sort of elevates this to something even bigger. I mean, that's a national emergency to have the National Guard called out. And obviously, Governor Nixon felt he needed to do this.
Absolutely. And people have been saying, in fact, have been telling me for a while that what needs to happen in this case is the National Guard needs to really come out and take control. Because, you know, if you look at what's been happening, certainly by the local authorities, and then they brought in the state troopers, which meant well, but it still were not able to control the situation. I've been told that maybe the best solution is to bring in the National Guard. And then there are a couple other things that need to happen. Among them, of course, is the feds coming in and doing an autopsy. And a lot of people in Ferguson are saying what would, for many of them, would take a lot of people off the streets is if this police officer is arrested and charged with a crime.
Yeah, and you know, John, it is so just mind-boggling to realize that 2/3 of the residents in Ferguson are African American, yet the power structure remains all white. And while there are 53 police officers on their force, only 3 African Americans, it's kind of difficult to police properly when your force and the city power structure doesn't even represent the people who are the majority there.
And you wonder, Angela, how could that be in this community where, in fact, a lot of people have been waiting to hear members of the city council, the mayor, someone coming out and speaking. We haven't seen any of that, and makes a lot of people wonder whether or not they are in tacit agreement with what the authorities there are doing. I mean, it's mind-boggling. There are no city officials out to my knowledge, and to a lot of the people I've spoken with, to talk about this. And the police, it seems to be a power unto themselves in Ferguson. One of the things that I wanted to mention, though, Angela, something that I'm really concerned about is how the media is being treated in all of this.
Absolutely.
And you've seen the reports of some members of the media being arrested, and some really being treated fairly unfairly in Ferguson, and that's a real concern.
And I mean, you know, I'm wondering if the reason the mayor and the city council members are not making themselves known is because they're all white except for one person on the city council. So, you know, that doesn't look good. I was looking at one press conference where the Ferguson Police Chief Tom Jackson was surrounded by officers, and they were all these tall, big, burly white guys. And finally the camera pulled back, and I'm like, there's the black lady standing over there, and there were the three black officers were there. But branding wise and marketing wise, come on guys, have your African American officers up front, close to the police chief. You know, there's just major problems. I mean, this is just the beginning of us learning about the problem of Missouri. But racism in Missouri is nothing new.
Clearly, and you know what, Angela, there are a lot of Fergusons all over this country.
That's right.
But it makes you wonder, how could it be that here we are in 2014, you have a city council in a city that's majority African American, where there are, you know, African Americans hardly represented on the city council, and then you look at the police force, which is supposed to protect and serve their community. It seems that it's doing neither, from the numbers and from what we've been seeing. Which,
to me, makes what happened seem like, yeah, I would expect it to happen. Community policing is important. You have to know the people. You have to get to know your community. You have to want to get to know the community that you serve. But when you don't live in that community, or when the power structure looks the same, you know, as you do, and not the same as the majority of the people in that community, you don't have a closeness with that community. You're not invested in that community.
And I think the question going forward, Angela, is, okay, what happens now to Ferguson, Missouri, after this whole thing is over? Are we going to see a community that remains the same, that's in terms of the way it's looking and its power structure now, that it's going to be looking like that in a year, 2, 3 years from now? I mean, those are the questions that I think people need to ask, and certainly questions that people need to work on keeping the feet of the power structure there to the fire, and making sure that there are changes in this community.
You're 100% correct. And now that so much focus is on Governor Nixon's state, it would behoove him to make sure something is done. And to your point earlier, you know, turning the safety issue over to the State Highway Patrol, that just wasn't sufficient enough. And you're right, the National Guard did need to come in because, you know, initially you had the Ferguson Police Department overreacting and with over-militarized gadgets. Then you had the State Highway Patrol officers not responding and not reacting when looting and rioting was going on. So we need that National Guard, something there to sort of bring everything peacefully, you know, down a certain notch, because there are no leaders coming out. There are none.
You're right. And Angela, look, you and I have talked a long time about what's happening outside of America. We've talked about what the recent war that we saw in the Middle East. We've talked about Boko Haram. We've talked about South Africa and other places. You would think, in looking at what has been going on in Ferguson this last week or so, that we were looking at something that's happening outside of this country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The pictures don't say the United States. It says what's going on in Syria or Afghanistan. No, this is the United States. And while, yes, it is important that we have a global perspective, we need to know what's going on in our country. And unfortunately, John, a lot of times we're not going to know until something as awful as this happens, and then it puts a spotlight on a certain community.
And it also puts a spotlight, in this case, on the number and the amount of ammunition and in many of these communities that they receive from from being involved in the Middle East and Iraq.
That's right.
I mean, if you look at the kind of equipment that was driving down the streets of Ferguson, you wonder, are we in Baghdad?
That's right.
It was incredible to look at all of that.
And just so you know, the state received $17 million, if I'm not mistaken, in military gadgets. So why do you need military gadgets in order to, you know, protect and serve citizens in the United States? It's just, and in Ferguson, it's 22,000 people. This is ridiculous.
And that's the thing. And I think what we're seeing, and as I mentioned earlier, one of my deep concerns in all of this is about the treatment of the media who are out there trying to cover this story.
Right.
And as I think you probably know, I'm the national chairman for the International Press Institute here in the United States. And we are extremely concerned about the way the police and others in Ferguson are treating the media who are out there trying to tell the story. I mean, I've seen many reports of those in the media talking about being hit with rubber bullets, some in the middle of all the tear gas that's being shot. You have police roughing up many of them, and as I mentioned earlier, some of them have even gone to jail. And it makes you wonder if the authorities there have no regard for the First Amendment as it relates to working and treating the media. It makes you wonder, what are they doing to their own community, and which is what we've been seeing sadly on television these many days out there.
Well, John, as we know, this is a democracy, and one of the ways you rank how well a democracy is operating is how well are its journalists treated, and journalists have been treated very poorly there in Ferguson. But you know what? The spotlight has been shown on that situation as well. Miami Herald World editor John Yearwood always providing us with just the right amount of extra special information we need in this situation. John, we're just going to keep covering this story the best we can and keep our focus. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us your insight, sir.
Thank you very much, Angela. And you know, hopefully for the people in Ferguson, this situation does not continue too much longer.
Agreed. John Yearwood, thank you so much, and we'll be right back.